in tonight's presentation. Ground rules, if you have any questions, feel free to take off your microphone and proceed. Or you can raise your hand, I, uh, and interject. So just, we want to make this as participatory as possible, right? Because it gets a bit boring once, there's just one person talking. But we'll try to make this as interactive as possible and get some interaction, even if it's via the chat feature. Okay. So again, guys, welcome. And I thank you guys for being here again tonight. And I'm sorry if I don't know, I feel like I'm battling a little allergy right now. I'm hoping it's just allergies, but I just started feeling a little bit like stuffy a few minutes ago. So just bear with me.
I was like that last week, Rennie. So I think it is just something that is
All right.
like common fluids.
Yeah, with the COVID numbers right now, it's very scary. I mean, it's scary to see how many people are COVID positive at this moment. Alrighty. So just to recap about 5 to 7 minutes while you all are here. So yesterday we talked about NEMO as an organization and who we are and how you as a CERT team member, as a volunteer, play a role in the NEMO as an organization. All right. We spoke about NEMO having 15 committees, okay, serving different essential service functions and led by various line ministries who are experts in their everyday running, they're experts in that certain field. Once we are activated, once NEMO is activated, the entire force of the different line ministries, the different departments would come together and we come together and we get the job done. And as a volunteer, you are a part of the system because we do depend on you to carry out various functions. Anybody remember at least one committee name? Can I just get that in the chat, please? Just so that I can know that you guys were listening and all that. Let me open my chat. I have the participants list up, but I'll go ahead and open my chat just so that I can see. So we had yesterday I mentioned that we had 15 different committees led by various government ministry. All right, we spoke about. I asked who would be the committee that you would call on if you're at a shelter and you need food. You need food for your shelterees. Who would be the ones that you would call that would be sitting representing that specific committee? You can go ahead and drop it in the chat. Just let me know. I need some. I do need some feedback. I'm sorry, guys. And if you don't want to chat, just turn off your microphone and just go ahead. You have an option. All right. While you're thinking about that, I'll go ahead and continue, but I will get back to it. We talk about when NEMA was formed. We talk about the act that NEMA is governed under, Chapter 145, the laws of Belize, which we follow to a T. This act speaks to the shelter list, when the shelter list should be published. It speaks to you as a shelter manager. If you're ever called upon to do shelter management, I don't have my camera on. Let me turn let me turn on my camera. I think that makes a difference sometimes.
Another note, Renis, we have people that are joining now.
All right. For some reason, I'm not I have a view here that I'm not able to see much, but I'll go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm just changing my view here. I don't know if Ron is playing with I don't know what's going on, but I'm not able to see certain features that I'm used to. I just turned on my camera. Oh no, I did not turn on my camera. I turned on my camera. Turn it on. All right, there.
Now we can see you.
Yeah, I think it does make a big difference when you can actually see the person that's speaking. It makes a very big difference. I forgot to turn on my camera just now. So anybody have the answer to the question about Nemo? And that question again, guys, we have 15 different committees, 15 different committees serving a specific essential service function. If you can just name one committee, it was 15 of them. Okay, I hear something. I guess people are putting no, I don't see anything in the chat. All right. So I'll definitely have to come back to that question. I'm not getting feedback from nobody, and I need to make sure that what we covered yesterday was understood. All right. Okay, Maya Santos. Maya Santos mentioned that the Special Needs and Diverse Ability Committee, yes, that was a new committee that was added. So thank you, Maya. I know that you were listening. Okay, so going back to yesterday's recap, we spoke about the law that governs NEMO. It's Chapter 145, the laws of Belize. Y- Go ahead, feel free to Google it. It protects you as a shelter manager. It's very, um, extensive. It covers a whole lot. So if you're going to be a part of the NEMO system, then you have to know what laws are out there that protect you. Okay. Um, Moving on, we talked about CERTs. What does CERT stand for? CERT. You're interested in becoming a CERT team member in your locality. And so, what is the meaning? What does CERT stand for? It's an acronym. It actually stands for something. Anybody could tell me? Anybody could tell me what CERT stands for?
Let's just do a random call, maybe. Mr. Jomael Verde, do you recall from yesterday what CERT stands for?
Okay, Bibiani Yam says Community Emergency Response Team. Yes, correct. Thanks, Bibiani. Miss Yam, thank you. All right, so I'm sorry to be torturing you, but we need to make sure that we did something. We also went over what certs are and what certs are not. So you're a community emergency response team member. And what you are not is that you are not a first responder. Okay. You are not a first responder as such. So you are there to build the bridge, the gap for when the professional emergency responders arrive. For example, in the case of a fire, um, in the case of a fire, for example, you have a small fire situation or even a big fire. You try as much as possible to take down the fire, but you don't know firefighter. You can't go climb up on nothing and try out this fire completely because you're only there bridging the gap for when the professional firefighters arrive. All right. Similarly to a first aid, a medical emergency, if there's a bleeding scenario, somebody got shot, they're bleeding, you are there to just contain that bleeding until the emergency responders arrive. And so, as a community emergency response team member, there are certain functions that we do expect for you to assist with. We have preparation. There may be times when Ronnie would be calling upon you to assist with issuing flyers at a specific location, at a park, at an event. We also may be calling upon for your assistance in different functions. So we also went over some terms, okay? We went over some definitions. Kenton went into detail explaining the different definitions. I'm sorry to put you through this, guys, but if somebody could just tell me one where you remember off the top of your head, one definition in emergency lingo. You could go ahead and chat. Or turn off your microphone, either way. We're only asking for one. I think we went over how much, Kenton?
At least a good half dozen.
Half dozen. Okay, the disaster cycle that we wear on our chests, it's on our logo. It's a cycle that shows that NEMA not only work when there is a disaster, contrary to popular belief, we not only work when there's a disaster, we have a cycle of different activities um, that around the clock, we're always working, we're always doing something during non-crisis times. Um, we went over the disaster cycle, we went over different terms, and this is the last question I'm asking, guys. All right, so I will call upon somebody. Okay, Cesar May. If you could just tell us one term, let us know what the name of that term is and what you understand that it means. Cesar May. Caesar May. Caesar May. Can you can you either turn off your microphone or chat into the chat feature? Chat it to us. Chat to it. I wonder if anybody's there tonight, Ronnie. All right. All right. I
That was my
see.
same question, but I see some of the participants are logging in, but then they must answer the
My
question. Don't feel shy, you know.
Yeah, we're a team, guys. We are here together. We're in this together. We will be seeing each other every night for the next week. I hope everybody get the schedule, but we are with each other every night for the whole week, and not be shy. Maya Santos mentioned preparedness, and that is getting ready for a threat. So thank you, Maya Santos. That is correct. So just to repeat I'll just go over the emergency cycle. So we have mitigation, preparation, response, and recovery. All right, Kenton went into detail on those topics, so I won't go and belabor that point. Okay, so we did a quick review, and so we'll go into the shelter management unit. All right, I think it's projecting, but I saw it earlier. Ronnie, if you could project it for me, now, please. Or do you want me to project? Do you want me to project?
No, that's okay. I can project it.
Okay, the only thing
It's
I,
okay.
I won't have the control over changing my own slides, but that's fine as long as we know that you're there.
From the bottom there, Renice, you can take control of whenever you want.
All right, I did not know that. I don't see the presentation as yet. Are you sharing?
Let me share it right now.
Last night we had about 20 people in the room. I noticed that we have 9 tonight. We have 9, but like we do understand that we have a lot of tour guides in the group, and they have different hours, and some of them mentioned that they would be traveling, so understood. Okay, so you said that I can change my slides doing what? Hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to figure this out, how I can have a little bit of control over these slides running. Ronnie, I know you mentioned that I can change my slides doing something, but I didn't get it, and I'm not sure how to do that if I'm not sharing. Okay, I'm not sure if you're hearing me, Ronnie, but let's move on to the other slide. I just wish I had some control over changing the slides, but I don't know if that will work. Yeah, I just want to mention as well, while Ron is doing that, is that as a community emergency response team member, as a CERT member, um, it's good that you know a lot of different little bits of information. That way you're cross-trained in different areas, so that if you're ever called to assist, we know that you're done trained, you're good, you're ready to go. All right, so we might not go into full details. Normally this training is for the most part, we do this training for people who would be dedicated to just shelters. For example, we have public officers who are a part of the system, and so we do this training for public officers who would be able to manage shelters. And so, for the most part, that is what they're earmarked to do once we need them. All right. All right. So, okay. So this training, the reference for this training is the USAID/OFTA Shelters and Shelter Management Reference Guide. If you Google that term, you'll see an extensive, I think it's almost a 100-page document that goes into detail as to how to manage shelters. All right. This is just pulling out some of the information from this reference guide and giving it to you. I also want to mention as well that we have a shelter manager's handbook that was finalized about 3 years ago. And this shelter manager handbook is more like a guide that you would have in a shelter. And as you face different issues at the shelter, we just basically look into the table of contents and refer to that page. So I believe it's about 20 pages. In the annex section, we have the shelter forms, which is very useful. At times, you are sent to a shelter and some shelters may not have the forms. So, all the forms are there. Contact phone numbers are in this shelter manager's handbook, as well as the shelter rules that you can maybe copy and copy with a marker on a blank sheet of paper and place inside your shelter. So it's an improvement from what we had before, and it's very resourceful for people who are either not trained or they probably received the training more than 3 years ago and they need something to refer back to. Okay. So next slide. Ronnie, I don't know. I'm not getting any feedback from you. Am I able to change these slides by myself?
How is it again, Renis?
Am I able to change these slides by myself, even though I'm not sharing it?
Okay. Do you have the presentation on your computer so I can stop presenting and you present it from your computer?
Oh, see, that's all right. If I do that, then I have to turn my camera off.
No, no, you don't need to. You just present. Oh, let me stop presenting. Okay. There, and then you take the lead.
All right.
You can left your camera on, no problem.
Okay. Let me share.
Ronnie, I'm not sure if you're following the messages in the group chat, but there's some people who are having difficulty logging on, and one is saying they can't interact. So I guess we weren't hearing probably some of the responses that some of the participants would have liked to input. Apparently, we're having some
Okay.
kind of technical difficulty for quite a bit of people.
Okay. I think that is the internet connection because I'm logging to 3 devices and it's still. Let me check it right now. Right now, I'll check it, Kenton. Okay, I already responded. Let me see.
Yeah, while you're doing that, I'm sharing.
Okay.
To actually find the presentation. Window, day 2. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm sharing. I'm hoping that everybody could see my presentation. And let me just quickly go into the chat.
I can see it, Renis.
Okay. You can see it. All right. So let me go ahead and start. I hope that everybody could see it. I don't know if my camera is on. Yeah, see, that's the thing. When you're sharing, it automatically turns your camera off. That's fine with me. But so let me proceed. Wow, we have 30 messages started. Can't connect. I hope that everybody can see this presentation and we're not having any more technical difficulties. All right. So the aim of this presentation is to underscore the importance of disaster preparedness and shelter management procedures for yourselves, volunteers who will be called to perform emergency management duty. And this is in the area of shelter management. This is the unit that we will be covering tonight. Okay. So at the end of this training, you should be, and we will be sending this presentation out to you. All right. So at the end of this training, you should be able to explain how NEMO goes about selecting, organizing, and managing a shelter using the shelter administrative and operational procedures. Secondly, discuss important shelter management issues and to identify workable solutions. And then lastly, to integrate and coordinate NEMO approaches and concepts for disaster management into your own programming, all right, into your own reality. So Unit 1 speaks to shelters. What are they? For the most part, you already know what a shelter is, all right? You should know. Anybody could name me the biggest shelter in Corozal, in the district, or any shelter for that matter that is nearby your home that you are aware of and you know that that's a shelter. You could put it in a WhatsApp group, you can put it in the chat feature. Name one shelter for me, and that way that I know that you know where your shelters are, you know what a shelter is. Shelter. Okay, I don't want to go back and if you could just take off your microphone to make it quicker. The thing is, while I'm sharing, I'm limited somewhat because I don't want to be going back and forth and then it kicks me out and usually there's some issue with this technology. So about shelter, what is a shelter? So a shelter is a safe building and it could either be private or public, providing temporary housing, considering the needs of different um, considering the needs of different abilities of people who are unable to live in their own homes due to an emergency or disaster. All right. And we say private because in addition to the public shelter list that is published in the newspaper or published online or published within the media, district coordinators have private list of shelters that they would have identified prior. And so if all the shelters on the actual shelter list are full, these are the shelters, these are our backup shelters. Okay. So it could be private or public owned. Usually shelters are schools, community centers. I know in Corozal you have CCC, you have CJC. We have a picture here of a shelter. All right. Big, strong, sturdy schools for the most part. So we have two types of shelter. We have the short-term shelter, we have long-term shelters. The difference between the two is that short-term shelters would be occupied for no more than 2 weeks, and long-term shelters would be a housing situation that people would be staying in until they could recover and return to permanent accommodation. An example of this would be for the 2020 flood, which affected the Cayo district, affected the Belize River Valley. People had flood like all the way halfway their houses. And they were placed in long-term shelters because they didn't know, we didn't know when the water would recede. So they were placed in extended shelters. Community centers were actually utilized, and so we had people actually living at a shelter, they go to school. No, actually, no, not school because schools were closed. So people going to work, coming back, living in the shelter, normal day-to-day activities,
Mr.
washing your
Wallace,
clothes. Yes.
what slide are you on?
Oh, about shelters.
Because I'm still seeing the slide, the overview, so I'm not sure if the slides
Oh,
are
wow, yeah.
moving.
Can you see about shelters here?
I'm seeing it now, Unit 1 about shelters.
Okay, that's yeah.
We, we can
When
see
I
it now,
put it in the
Renis.
slide, when I put it in at a bigger slide view, it does that. Like it doesn't really move.
You
So
know, you have to keep it like this.
yeah,
Yeah.
I just remember. I just
Yeah, it
remember.
was
I'm
nice.
sorry. And nobody not tell me nothing.
I just tell you.
You tell me after I don't go through 5 slides. Aye. That's fine. At least you tell me. I appreciate that. So
Well, when you start to talk about see a big building here, I realize that we never see the big building, right? So
okay, got it. All right,
I keep
guys.
on
So
saying it, but it seems that my microphone, or I don't know.
okay, somebody said something just now. What, your microphone is not working? Okay. So like I said, two types of shelters, short-term, long-term shelters. All right. Anybody have any
present
questions on this?
presentation
Excuse me,
gone.
Renis.
Yes, go
You
ahead.
disconnected the screen, sharing screen.
Yeah, screen is gone.
How that happened. All right. Let me try to fix it.
Just showing the participants.
Is it showing now?
Yeah.
Oh
Now,
yeah,
yes. Do you
I
want
did
to
press that accidentally. I'm so sorry. I pressed it accidentally. Go. What were you
can you
saying,
go
Ronnie?
on the slideshow screen so it gets bigger for the participants,
The
please?
problem is when I
When you
do
do
that, when I
that,
go on the
you not
slideshow,
change.
it don't move. The slides don't move.
Okay, well, that is okay.
It's
For me,
okay.
that
I
is
hope that
okay.
everybody could see it. We want to share all of this information. It won't be as big as we hope that it would be, but these are just some of the challenges
It
with
is
this.
visible though.
It's
You
all right,
probably could make
reasonable.
it,
That's good.
Miss Ogales, you probably could make it bigger on the right
Okay.
lower left, where the percentage right. Right.
Yeah,
Right, in
correct.
All
Zoom.
right.
Yep.
Okay. Good. 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 Thank you, guys. I'm not computer illiterate, but someone I think I know work with you sometime. All right. Moving on to the next slide. The purpose of a shelter. People don't usually go to shelter because they just want to go. All right.
No se puede, no se
They
puede.
find
No pasa.
they find themselves in situations where they're in a bind and they have to go to a shelter. And some of the reasons are for protection. The house not strong enough to be safe, housing and escape. So we see in that picture there, there are people there, four
Oh,
members
hello.
of our household. When I left it at a staircase. Now imagine if they had stayed at their home during this disaster. The whole house blew down. So you see here that there is a purpose for going to a shelter, and usually it's for protection and safety.
Ni el chat no aparece. No sé qué.
Llámele, dígale.
All right. So unit 2. In this unit, we'll pretty much go over a brief as to how NEMO goes about selecting shelters, doing inspections, and then if maintenance is needed, what is done. All right. So we have a picture here of a community. Question: would it be right for Nemo to select one shelter as one of those little houses that you could see down at the bottom? Would it make sense for Nemo to have a shelter in that area?
No,
No? Why?
because of the when it rains a lot, as you can see there, the the mud would come all down to the houses
Mhm.
and wash it away,
Exactly.
possibly.
Exactly. Yeah, there are certain hazards that you could already see here. And if it provide protection and
Landslide.
safety for people, yeah, exactly, exactly. Thank you. So that is a very good point. And so we not just select any building to be used as a shelter. We have to look at the structure itself. We have to look at different things around the shelter, look at different hazards that are around the shelter. And then we can go ahead and say, all right, we will be using this as a shelter. And when I say we, I'm speaking on in an entire group of people that will go and look at different things. Okay, you have somebody from the Ministry of Health, a representative, I'm sorry, from the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, the fire department. We have architects or engineers as well, looking at the structure of the building. We have the district coordinator going along on that team as well. The district coordinator would be looking at things around the shelter, different hazards that are nearby. So there is a team of people that actually go out and inspect these shelters on an annual basis. Currently, right now as we speak, not right now this minute, but in this week and in this month and next month, we are focusing on shelter inspections. All right, schools are being looked at to see if they're still strong, sound, and if there's any repairs needed, then a proposal would be submitted for that. This is just some pictures in Corozal of some shelters being inspected. So you can see here, like I mentioned, it's a team. You need a multidisciplinary approach. And so while one person might be looking at something, another would be looking at something else, at another issue. Pictures just for you to get an idea of how shelter inspections are done. Anybody recognize the name of the school? I know it's a Corozal. This is Corozal because this picture was sent by Ronnie, and this shelter inspection was done last year in March. I know that it's Corozal, but I don't know the name of the shelter. Anybody recognize it? Nah, I don't think so. How this one? Oh, no, no, recognize none of the shelters, yeah? Anybody could name me one shelter?
Release, they
Go
answered
ahead.
through the message chat.
Oh,
They didn't
oh.
recognize it. It's
Yes, guys, please be me. Please monitor that chat for me because I am not. I ask questions and even go back and forth between the two. I just afraid that okay, somebody they CCC, bravo, 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 CCC. All right, all right. Okay, so I'll go back to the presentation. So these are the things that I already mentioned. Things that are considered when shelters are being selected. So they look at accessibility. The team looks at how accessible is this building from different points of view. It has to be on high ground. I mean, like that picture where I show you, that's not the very first picture with the mudslide, possible mudslide situation. You won't want any shelters to be done at the foot of a valley. It should be away from coastlines or flood-prone areas. Okay, I know Corozal has the coastline right there. One of the threat to that would be the storm surge situation, and so you don't want to put nobody in a shelter that would put their lives at risk. So in terms of the physical location, a shelter should be about 100 to 200 meters away from hazardous material. And so that includes gas stations as well, landfill sites, tall trees. The condition of the drain should be noticed, the road, the street that goes to the building. So this all comes back to accessibility. You don't want to select a shelter that is cut off from society, and you can't meet the needs of people in the shelter. All right. So the age and history of the building should be considered, whether it survived a hurricane or an earthquake. The team should be looking for snakes. There are some schools or some community centers that are not regularly used. So these are some of the things that they have to look on: snake, rat bat, roach, ants, wood lice, mosquitoes, flies. You cannot have people living in a shelter where this situation presents itself. And so this is why the shelter inspections are done every year, to make sure that the shelter is habitable. More than 3 stories high. They're looking at the roof, the eaves. We mentioned hurricane straps yesterday. Windows, shutters. Okay, and then so most schools that are built now are, standard classroom size. You have the big classrooms as well. We have the dividers. So for COVID-19, you will see where that would come in handy. Look for cracks, exposed and rusting steel. Check the fence, the gates, etc. Now, in terms of space and amenities, all these might not be present in every single shelter. And in cases like that, plans would be made in order to make it as comfortable as possible for the shelterees in that particular shelter. I'm sorry, somebody mentioned something? Okay, Jesse Aldana, I guess, is having issues.
Yes,
Jesse, are you?
yes, night miss. I simply want to comment something about the group that inspect the different places, because
Okay, go ahead.
usually every time that they come here to our community, they inspect, and we have some problems with the windows that has been for years and years, and no attention has been placed to it. So I am not sure really if that team is really working, no, because that has happened. And what we do is that the school, the principal and teacher, we are the ones changing the things, no. It has not been taken care of, and the it is a shelter, biggest shelter in our community, and some of the doors are not really. I think it's not going to take maybe 2 or 3 category hurricane, as they are old.
Okay. Thanks, Jesse. Could you tell us the name of the shelter? I'm not sure if one is familiar with it, but the name of the shelter?
Yes, that is Sardinia La Inmaculada RC School.
Okay. Sartineja RC, La Immaculada RC School.
Yeah. For example, I'm talking on my class, talking about my class. I asked my husband to patch up the door. I'm sure that that's not going to take a category, not even 4. That's gonna fly away.
Right. And so what about the school management? What are they saying?
Well, they have got some of the doors. We have been changing them little by little, and we are almost over changing all of them. They are the ones helping us, and some parents.
Maybe I can intervene, Renis.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Miss Jessie, um, every year we do a inspection to each village, no, and each shelter, which should be considered a community center or a school. So we take along with us, it's a team, a shelter inspection team with the public health inspector, the fire,
Yeah.
an engineer from NEMO headquarters, or sometimes we get provided by the Ministry of Works. And
Yes.
me myself, I go along with that team to coordinate so they can do their reports, and that is being sent out to Belmopan. Um, we are aware. We get contact with Mr. Zol
Yes, sir.
from that it's that school, RC school.
Yes, sir.
Um, and then this has been, even Ms. Velma Godoy and Ms. Brasta are aware of this. So the team does their report, and that goes through a protocol whereby we send it to headquarters, and it all depends on the national level to do so and get back to you guys. So we do know, and the committee, you see how it works. You see the same structure as how Renice and at the beginning, my colleague Kenton Param said that about the different committees. We have the Committee of Ministry of Education with us also, which is education, information, communication, and warning, and housing and shelter. So they are aware of this. And in fact, we even have a board with us, Mr. Francisco Magana, which is he's the manager, the
Manager.
school manager, and he is
Yeah.
aware of this. And the thing with this is that as soon as there is a project or something in the national level, then they select the different school which needs the priority ones, you know. And that is what I was telling Mr. Zul, that whenever we go there, we have to be very careful, because at the end of the day, we have in total 70 odd schools to deal with.
Yeah.
So as soon as something, from the national levels comes up, then they decide where to do the updates, no, the fixing. Because trust me, the ones in Concepcion, and I don't know if you're aware, the ones in Copper Bank, where the roof was being exposed because of rat bat infestation, they give priorities to the
Yeah.
ones that need more attention first.
Okay. Understand.
But trust me, this is has been passed through Ms. Velma Godoy, Ms. Brasta, and Mr. Zola, and Mr. The manager, the school manager. No? So this has been brought up to the national level. So let's just wait for this inspection that we're gonna do this year. In fact, next week we're gonna
Okay.
begin, and the housing and shelter, which is Ms. Brasta and Ms. Velma Godoy, will be calling the different principals so we can reach out to their schools.
Okay. Waiting for you there.
Okay, Miss Jessie, we'll be there. Don't worry. In fact, we have
Okay.
the report, so I hope this year something happens, no, in the national
Yeah.
level. Okay.
Let's pray.
Okay, Miss Jessie. Yeah, thank you. And now that you're part of the NEMO system and you'll know a little bit more about how we operate, you can always, keep voicing your concerns and not bog running too much, but at least make you know, we still wait at times. Just okay.
I see
So
we have
we were at
Santiago with us, Renice. Good
okay.
evening, Santiago.
Hey, everyone, good night, good night.
Yeah, Mr. Acosta is a part of our team as well. He's I'll go ahead and ask him to introduce himself.
Hi, good night, everyone. My name is Santiago Acosta, and I'm the Assistant Training Officer, NEMO, and I work closely along with Miss Reniso Galdes.
All right, thanks. Mr. Nikolai Alvarado is saying that he's still not in. I still not in, is that I don't know if he hasn't if he's trying to get in and cannot. I'm not exactly sure in the WhatsApp chat group. Okay, so in terms of space and amenities, shelters should have sufficient potable water. Okay, functional toilets from a sewage system. I know in some cases functional toilets are a bit challenging because you have some toilets that are probably some are not there, some are a little bit of a walking distance away from the actual shelter. And in cases as such, I know there is a plan B in place, okay, for shelters that do not have one restroom. And I know this is a situation in Corozal. There are a few shelters, maybe not the shelters that you are aware of, but then got some shelters don't have no toilets, and in that case, people use buckets. And it's just a reality. Being a part of one shelter team, you need to realize that you have to be able to think quick, um, use whatever resources are available to handle that particular situation. Although this training makes it seem that everything will be perfectly there, the reality is that due to whatever reason, you may not have a perfect scenario at your disposal. And so, as a part of the shelter team, you have to work with what you have. Okay, we try to put out as many scenarios as we possibly can, but each situation is different and can present its own challenges. So they also look at challenged persons, how they can access shelters. We know with the ramp, I mean, if you're wheelchair bound, somebody who is in a wheelchair can easily enter into a shelter. Connecting doors. With COVID-19, we have to separate. It's 10 persons per classroom. So if a particular building has the connecting doors, then that would be a way of actually cordoning off different areas so that you're abiding by the 10 persons per classroom restriction. And we will get to the COVID-19 protocols. In shelters, you want to make sure that you have adequate spacing for the general shelter area where people will be sleeping. There needs to be an office space, medical, with COVID-19 especially. There has to be a little medical area that is there for you. Security, okay. And then in terms of electrical power, alternate power, some shelters are lucky enough to have one generator, not all shelters. So these are always pluses and there are amenities to make everybody comfortable as possible within a shelter. Okay. So that covers unit 1 and unit 2 in terms of how we go about, what shelters are and how we select, inspect, and maintain shelters. So we covered that just now. Anybody have any questions before we move on to unit 3, which Mr. Param will be taking the floor on? Okay. So since we don't have no questions, we'll go ahead and proceed. Kenton, the floor is yours. I'm sorry, what I will do is I will stop sharing. Is it, would that be fine? Or do you want me to continue sharing and then just change the slides for you?
Yes, could continue share because I don't think I have that on my laptop here. I have a different presentation.
All right, so yeah, there you go.
Okay, this next unit will be dealing with shelter administration, and this is where we'll get into the how a shelter functions and how the shelter team will pretty much manage that shelter, what it all entails. So this next unit will deal with some of that. change? Okay, when you're managing a shelter, dealing with shelter, a lot of people will be coming to the shelter with a lot of different expectations and a lot of different situations that they're dealing with, probably within their home, within their job, within their life, different thing. And so when people come to the shelter, you have to deal with all of these issues that are coming to the shelter, along with these shelterees, right? And they come with concerns and fears and different things about shelter. A lot of people don't want to go to a shelter. It's not the place to be. So if anybody have another option, it's preferred that they would take that option. Normally, people that will come to a shelter are those who really don't have another option. They can't shelter with family. They can't shelter. They don't have any family to shelter with, or friends, or another alternative. So shelter is really kind of like a last resort for many people. But when they come to the shelter, while you as the shelter team will have to deal with the management of the resources and the amenities within the shelter, you will also have to manage people and manage their deficiencies and some of the fears that they will come with. And so one of them will be the threat of and the dangers associated with the disaster itself, or the hurricane, or the flood, or the fire, whatever the incident that triggered the shelter to be open. And so just the threat of dealing with that situation would have an impact on the shelterees themselves. It's pretty much difficult to get by sometimes without these threats that would be upon us, and then that's just another added thing that they would have to deal with. So when they're coming to the shelter, they're not coming with, as if they're going to a game or something like that. They're coming with all these pressures on top of them. And so you as the shelter wardens and managers will have to sometimes deal with people who are dealing with these situations, and knowing how to manage them, and being aware in the first place that they're coming with these situations should help you to appreciate the situation that they're in, and make room for them and to be able to deal with their situation. Another factor, if I put it like that, can impact people is crowding, or the amount of people in a shelter. When you're in your home, you're used to maybe 5-6 people if you have an average size family, or maybe you're just two people in the home or whatever. But when you go to a shelter, you will be interacting with a lot more people in that one room. Well, which in normal situation could be up to about 25 people probably, or more per room. The COVID protocols now, it's a little less, but just having to share a room and share bathroom facilities and eating space and sleeping space with people that you're not used to is something that shelterees will have to are not accustomed to, and will have to deal with. And so this is one of the factors that might affect them. The shelter facilities might not be what they're used to. For some, it might be better than you're used to, and for others, it might be a lot less. And so the stress of having to deal with that as well are things that will also impact the shelterees, and that in turn will impact you as a manager and as a warden. So people coming to the shelter are coming because of a hazardous situation. They're trying to find a safe place that they can pass and stay and pass the incident, and until that is passed, and then they can go back, hopefully back to their homes if it's still there now. But while they're going through that situation, they will be with you, and you'll all be together in that building, and having to deal with the issues that come along with the shelterees. The availability of food and water, again, or lack thereof, can impact the shelter experience for shelterees and both yourself. So another factor, and there's many other factors probably that can arise within a shelter as it relates to the the amount of people in a shelter, the lack of resources, or the amenities that might be available or not available in the shelter. And so really you're there to manage that whole process, right? And one of the things we need to recognize right off the bat, going into this, is that the people coming there are coming there so that they can pretty much save their lives, and they're moving from a very vulnerable situation into a situation that is more offer them that safety, but still probably not the comforts that one would want to expect or need. And so it's that kind of situation that you will find yourselves in trying to manage these incidents, these shelters. And so these are citizens that are seeking a safe place, that are trying to find the best way to pass this incident, and bringing whatever resources they might have, and some might have and some might not have. And so all of these things compound together can present a very unique situation for you, and you being able to manage it. Next slide. Okay. So the going into the shelter, talking about the shelter management team, we start off with the manager, right? And pretty much a shelter manager is a public officer or a community member. So it can be a volunteer, where you can draw from, churches or NGO groups, different areas. But they are assigned on behalf of NEMA, and in accordance with Chapter 145 of the Laws of Elizabeth, this disaster act, for the overall responsibility to manage shelter use, utilizing whatever resources is available. And so while the ideal shelter will spell out certain things that we need to have in place in a shelter, there might be situations where you don't have all of that, and so you will have to be creative with the resources you have in trying to manage that shelter. The important thing is that the shelter manager will be working with a team of wardens. So collectively, you have while the manager has the responsibility, he also has the support of the managers and wardens to assist him with that process. The shelter manager is the lead in the shelter. He has the overall responsibility. There's a deputy manager to assist, and then there's a wardens beneath those deputy managers, each having a different responsibility. So we'll get into some of the tasks that are involved with managing the shelter. But selecting the selection of the shelter management team, like we mentioned earlier, we have public officers, but many times in communities, the community members, along with the village council and different agencies in that community, makes up shelter management team as well. So CERT members definitely can can fill the void here as shelter managers and as shelter wardens, and hence the reason you are getting this basic shelter management training. Some of the duties that is involved with managing a shelter. One, one of the first things you'll have to do is to register people. So you'll have an account of everybody in the shelter. So they are prepared registration forms that we have. So it's basically filling out those forms. And I think each form is geared towards a family. So you capture the entire family on that one form with the list of names and so forth. So you register them as they arrive, and then you assign a space for them to stay in the shelter. Another responsibility of the shelter management team is to provide security, and that means that you have someone to look after the safety of the persons in there. While in some large shelters, there will probably be the presence of police officers. It cannot be for every shelter because we simply just don't have enough police officers to do that. And so if you don't have a police officer, there needs to be at least someone who would have the responsibility to look after security issues. Never forget also that when you are managing a shelter, a lot of resources are in a shelter in terms of human resources. You might have retired police officers as a shelteree. You will have retired teachers or people with a lot of different kind of experience that can assist you on the team in managing that shelter. So you can draw from the human resource right within the shelters, from the shelterees, amongst the shelterees, right? Communication is key, especially for large catchment area. And so while there might be radio communication installed in some of the larger shelter, whatever means of communication, cell phone, using probably WhatsApp or whatever, if there's internet around, but we would want to utilize whatever means of communication we have with the Emergency Operations Center, which is called EOC at the district level, and there will be a designated person to deal with your issues as it relates to shelter. Remember, we have the housing and shelter management committee, so there will be a person in that emergency operations center that deals specifically with shelters. So whatever issue you might have, be it a medical issue or lack of supplies or whatever, that person will take those concerns and pass it on to the relevant committee or relevant personnel to deal with it. Right, so you will not be out there in those shelters cut off from NEMO, cut off from assistance. Right, there will be a direct link between you and your team and that shelter to the emergency operations center, which will be managing the whole district-wide response. Right, as long as there's a shelter open, the emergency operations center will be functioning 24/7, right? Even if there's just one shelter open, all right? So then there is that support. Food and water, relief supplies, under relief supplies management, there will need to be somebody on a shelter management team that look after this area, making sure that we have a record of what we receive, a record of what is distributed or used during the time of the shelter being open, whether you're preparing meals or distributing food in the shelter. And then the replenishing of those stock, depending on the length of time that you will be in that shelter. Medical and hygiene is also another area that you would need somebody to be in charge of in the shelter. And remember, like I said, if you're a shelter management team of about 6 persons, remember you can also draw on people that are in there to assist you. You might have, retired nurses in the shelter or people who are trained in first aid or that kind of thing. And so your job as the manager and wardens on that shelter management team is to do just that, to manage the shelter, manage the people in the shelter, manage the resources that you have available in the shelter, right, and manage the crisis situation that can I want to use the word crisis, but manage the situations that can come up within the shelter, right? The wardens are again public officers, PDF police officers, if they're available, teachers, nurse, volunteers, church leaders, sports leaders. So we can draw from a wide cross section of society in filling these spots there for shelter management team. Normally you'd want somebody that is motivated and that like working with people, somebody with a good head on their shoulders, can deal with a little bit of stress and be able to deal with people. So normally teachers do that pretty much every day, and so they would make good wardens and good managers, youth leaders as well, people who works in the church and work along with the congregation. Yeah, they tend to have that link leaning towards working with people, and so you can, in building your shelter management team, you can look to fill those gaps there. We want people with like we said, responsible with a good attitude. Definitely would be in physical shape, not pregnant or nursing. So you don't want somebody with a young infant or pregnant to be in that situation. Preferably, if they live near the shelter, or they will seek shelter in that general area, they might as well be a part of your team. A medical fit, not with any real medical challenges, that would be a detriment to that person. So we wouldn't want to put them in that position. No? And of course, we would want them to be available, during that period when the shelter would need to be open. And so your team would try to get as much people as a part of the shelter management team, so that if for some reason one can't be present, you'd have enough to manage the shelter. A small shelter management team could be with at least about 6 persons, but the more you get, the better. So generally, anybody that is willing to work, have a good attitude, that is responsible and dependable, can be a part of shelter management team, either as a manager or as a warden. The skill that is necessary for that, you acquire during training such as this, and repeated training. So the important thing is for that person to be available, to be willing, and to be a responsible person, and then the training will just be there for us to equip you. Before the disaster, or before the hazard impacts, there's a preparation at the shelter. Part of that starts with us at the NEMO department with the inspection. After we're through with that and the selection of the teams, then we try to, as best as possible, allow for the team to visit that shelter so that they can familiarize themselves with the building that they will be in terms of managing the shelter. So there might be visits to the shelter by the shelter management team so that they can situate themselves and get a feel of how they want to set up the shelter. In some cases, like a large school, you have different rooms. you can utilize different rooms for different functions. In some cases, your shelter might be just a big open space, a big open, maybe something like a warehouse kind of building. And so you have to figure out how you will designate certain areas, and you will see that as you get further into the training. So if you are managing a school, definitely the manager and a couple of the wardens will want to meet with the principal and talk about the function of that building and utilizing it as a shelter. The NEMO inspection team does this already, and so we go ahead and make arrangements for keys and different things. So when the time comes for you to actually access the building, we help with some of that. The ideal situation is for you to have a site visit before an incident actually occurred. Functional space and forms, work out the shelter space, which we normally already do. And so if we tell you you'll be assigned to CCC, Ronnie will already have the capacity for that building per room, and so that will be passed on to you. And so from there on out is for you to just determine the space and how you utilize it, which will be your medical bay or a medical room or your isolation room, since we're under COVID, or isolation space. If the school does not have, or the community center does not have a kitchen or kitchenette, how you will prepare meals if the need arises, and so forth. Make sure that you get all your forms that you will be needing, your shelter registration form to register the shelterees as they're coming up, your log form, different log forms for relief supplies and stuff that you will be receiving and tracking while you're in the shelter. So there's these forms that will be provided to you in the shelter package when you are tagged as shelter manager and shelter warden. So these are some of the areas that you will need to sort out in the building. Food and water, shelter regulations as shelter rules. We do have shelter rules, and so you can be familiar with it. I think that is in the shelter handbook as well that Mr. Ogales had talked about. So for quick, easy reference, you can find it. One of the things you want to do is ensure that you have, in terms of logistics, everything kind of sorted out, the equipment that you will need. One being radio, lighting, flashlight, or whatever you need in terms of that. List of backup shelters in case your shelter is get filled to capacity and people keep showing up. You can refer people to other shelters in the area. Of course, we will know about this because you will be in communication with the EOC, so we will know when you reach your capacity and when it's time to direct either through bulletins or announcement other shelters in your area. But via that communication with you that you will be able to know this and determine this. Establish a shelter routine. From the time you have people in the shelter, you have to think that there are certain routines that you need to establish, a certain activity that will be happening within a shelter, from the preparation of meals to the cleaning and sanitization of the sleeping area, bathroom area, food preparation area, and all of these things that need to be done. So the shelterees will be part of that routine. You have to remember you are there as managers to manage the process and the situation, and not necessarily to be doing some of these tasks. But it's you who will determine the division of labor here as it relates to some of these routine. The meal time is part of your routine. When establish a time for breakfast, establish a time for for lunch and supper and clean up afterwards, and the disposal of taking care of garbage. All of these things will be a part of your routine. Even daily meeting within your shelter will be part of your routine. And you want to start off strong with these routines from the time you get people in a shelter and begin to make them aware of such things, right? Social activities is another part of your routine, right? I'm not seeing the last one there because of that ribbon. Can switch. As I'm going, guys, I know I'm kind of rumbling off, talking fast, but please, if something is not clear or you don't quite get it, please put a message in the chat, and those guys will read it to me, or you can just say something. The objective is not to get to the end of the slide, but it's trying to give you as much information as we could within this short period of time that can assist you in helping your community, not necessarily helping us NEMO, but helping yourselves and your community to go through a difficult situation or difficult incident such as flood or hurricane. So again, it's to get you to be able to function in the capacity.
May hello.
Yes, I'm hearing something, but I'm not clear. Yes, I'm hearing something, but I'm not clear.
Hold on, I have to turn off the Bluetooth real quick. We're hearing the feedback. Hello.
Yes, hello, good night.
Yeah, I was just wanting to pipe in. We've been listening, and I found myself saying music and humor and prayer, and I wanted to applaud what you're doing. I really respect it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you guys being here too, because you are part of the whole scheme of us being able to get through these difficult situations when they do occur. We always say at NEMO that disaster is everybody's business. NEMO is just the kind of management agency that tries to get everybody to pull together, being human and physical resources to be able to recover as quickly as we possibly can from these incidents.
Yes, and I thought that your laying out a plan was of how you're going to orchestrate each day and finding things for people to do and using their gifts was a lovely guide, and I just wanted to applaud you and you know that we're out here and we're hearing you.
Okay, continuing on.
Somebody's mic is on.
Yeah, I'm hearing like somebody is trying to say something or ask a question, but I'm not clear. I'm not getting it clear. Don't forget, you can always use the chat, and whoever is monitoring the chat will let me know, and then we can deal with your questions. We do appreciate your questions and your input very, very much. It helps us. It helps us to do a better job. It helps us to tweak our training. And we, like I said, I always learn something from the sessions that we do, because there's a lot of ideas and a lot of brain power out there, right? So it's not us and you, it's us all together, right? So let's take that view on it. Huh? All right. In preparation for shelter and shelter management is one of the things that you really have to do is to participate like you're doing tonight in these shelter management training, right? Shelter management is only one of the disciplines that we focus on in terms of disaster management. And as CERT, as members of CERT, you will be sort of like a multidisciplinary team, because you will know how to, by the end of the week, you will know how to, and will be able to function as a part of first shelter management team. You will be able to be a part of a damage assessment team to help with the damage assessment. You'll have some first aid training, some little bit of basic light search and rescue training. You can get that as well. So CERT is a big part of the response and preparedness effort in terms of managing these disasters. And so we hope to have CERT teams all over the place, all over the country, trained CERT team, multidisciplinary teams that can function in these times of disaster. So participate in training is one, right? And encourage other people to get involved with training. We will do training whenever we get, people to participate from 6 people up. We will do training. Confirm you have enough public officers and trained wards. That is part of the NEMO Shelter Management Committee's function, right? And so you are part of that because you fill the gap where we don't have enough public officers, and we always are short, right? There's only a limited amount, and we spread out over a wide area of responsibilities. And so community participation is key. Community-based disaster management is our focus. So it's getting communities prepared and capacity built within those communities through volunteers like yourself and CERT members, that we can accomplish our goal, right? Update and maintain a list of shelter wardens. So we will have a list of all the people who are trained, so we can utilize them in the different areas.
I'm sorry, Kenton, are you there? Okay, I think Kenton might be having some connectivity issues. I'm not sure. All right, so while he's trying to get back on, I'm not sure if that's the case.
Sorry about that, guys. Really sorry about that. I had a call, a kind of an emergency call with the issue on the Corozal road with all the rain we're having. So again, you say, you have to be ready for when they call them, right? good news is the bus made it out, so we're good to go. All right, sorry about that. All right, equipment and supplies, handheld radio or VHF based radio at some of the shelters. We definitely do not have enough radio for every shelter. So you might be in a shelter where there's radio communication and you might not be. If you are in an area probably where you have phone signal and internet availability, that might be your main mode of communication. But communication is a key, and we will try to find the most appropriate way for us to communicate with the shelter. Vehicle, shelter management, the whole disaster management plan is to be able to have access to your shelter. While you might not have a vehicle assigned to your shelter, again, because you have limited vehicles, unless the team or someone, members of the team will have a vehicle that they can use. Definitely having access, vehicular access to your shelter is one thing that we look at. In the event that there is a situation where we need to remove somebody, if somebody's sick or something from the shelter or whatever, get supplies to you. Large catchment area, large shelters, our plan is to at least have a generator in some of these larger shelters, larger catchment area. But failing that, or even with that, flashlight, LED light, rechargeable light, that kind of thing. We would like to move away from lanterns that can be a fire hazard. So, nowadays you have a lot of solar rechargeable lighting. So we want to plan in that regards. No? So even you as your own shelter management team, if you find yourself as a CERT shelter management team, these are some of the things that you would want to be thinking about. See how you can access them, because it's not a given that we will be able to provide all of these things. While we will try our utmost best to do that. Right? It's always good to have some tools. I lost my presentation and I did nothing, so I'm sure. But it's while guys are working to get that back up. It's always good to have some tools, and somebody can, again, you draw on your shelterees. Might have carpenters, builders in there, right? But have some tools available in the shelter, like a hammer if you need to quickly nail up something, and these kinds of things. Some nails and so forth. A saw, maybe a hand saw, something like that. It's very useful. All right. All right, getting back. A first aid kit will definitely be in your shelter. I don't know how it is in Corozal, but I know for here in Toledo district, pretty much in every village there is at least one community health worker, and so your first aid kit in your community would come through your health worker. At the beginning of the hurricane season, going into June, one of the things that the medical, remember the 15 communities that Mr. Galdes talked about? Well, we have a committee that is called the Medical Care and Public Health Committee. And their responsibility is to ensure that every community has a first aid kit through the health worker. Where in like the municipality, like the town, will have more than one shelter, and you don't have that health worker mechanism in there. There will be a shelter kit in there. First aid training, again, is a part of the shelter management package, part of the team. So at least our goal is to get at least 1 or 2 persons per shelter management team trained in in first aid. Or while you're putting your team together, we try to find people who already have that training, like some of these blast people, you know, that can serve in that capacity, and having that first aid kit available and somebody knowing how to use it. Remember, your job is to do the basic first aid until the medical professionals get there and take over from you, right?
If shelters or schools, schools should have first aid kits also. Each
Well,
class.
that's a good point. That's a very good point. I'm not aware that they do, but that's a good point. That's one of the things I probably need to add as part of my questionnaire when I visit schools to ensure that they have. Actually, never thought about it. A fire extinguisher and a first aid kit should be present at each school.
At each school, sir. I know that.
I quite likely it might be. I just haven't really asked and thought about it, but that would be. But even so, that would be for the school's use. So we will ensure that a first aid kit goes along with this with the team, along with your, that would be a part of your shelter package, like your forms, your registration forms, your control forms for goods and these kinds of things, right? So be a part of it. But good point, good to note. Thank you very much. Disposable food and water containers, stationaries, ensure you have all of those necessary shelter forms. Again, it covers it. See Clorox there now on the things that's part of sanitization. Remember, we're under COVID, so there will be that cleaning and that sanitization of your shelter, which will take place regularly. So those measures will put, there's a section that we deal with to cover it, so we'll get to that. Bedding for challenged persons. One of our vulnerable groups is challenged persons or elderly persons. Children also are one of our vulnerable groups that as shelter managers and as shelter wardens, we need to really key in on this and pay keen attention to these vulnerable groups. They can easily be overlooked, you know, and as a result of that, not being taken care of properly, not by any intentional means, but you know, usually older people are more quiet, they sit in the corner, and sometimes you don't even know they're there, you know, and challenged persons, you know, and so we have to make an effort to look out for these vulnerable groups and ensure that they have the proper care and attention. Um, they say they can judge a society by how it takes care of its elderly, right, and challenged persons. So we want to come out good on that end. So if you see upon your registration, you see some elderly persons or some challenged persons coming into your shelter, that's what I think you want to make note of, right? And then you immediately contact the emergency operations center through your housing and shelter rep and say, hey, I have 2 people in here that just registered. They're quite up in age and kind of frail, you know, and then we would try to work out how to best deal with them in your shelter. One of the things we want to do is to make them as comfortable as possible, so we have bedding for challenged persons. So we would probably maybe provide a mattress or a sleeping bag or something to make their stay in the shelter a little bit more comfortable than the regular normal shelteree. All right. Move on. Space, water, hygiene, and sanitation. Space allocation. Normal circumstances, we cater to about 18 square feet per person, which is a 3 by 6 space with a walkway in between. So that can also work out to about 24 square feet, including that space per person. So that's how we come up with our capacity, right? Under COVID conditions right now, as it stands right now, unless it changes, we go to about 10 to 15 persons per room, depending on the size of room, right? Just for maintaining that distance on the COVID situation. Right? So space allocation. Like I said, some of this will be worked out for you before. Once we are opening a shelter and assigning you to that shelter, stuff like how many people that the shelter will hold and some of the other things that go along will already be worked out for you. So you don't have to worry about all of that. But that's a general information. If you find yourself in a building that we have to immediately make available and have done that exercise, generally you figure 18 square feet per person. So the exercise is the times the length by the width, and you'll get your square footage, and then you divide that by 18 square feet, and that will tell you how many people you need. You can accommodate in that building safely under normal circumstances. Water hygiene and sanitation, generally 1 gallon of water per person per day. Right? Now then, most shelters will have a backup water system, a tank if it's a school or community center, right? And so depending on the capacity of that tank, we will know how often it would need to be replenished based on the amount of people in there. So if you have 50 people in that building, you know, it's 50 gallons of water per day at least minimum that we would need to properly run that shelter, considering all the water and hygiene needs, sanitation needs. Generally, it's at least 1 toilet, shower, and wash hand basin for every 40 to 50 person. Now, this is ideal situation, so it might be more, might be a little less depending on your situation, right? But it is important that we emphasize the hygiene situation and the sanitation situation in these shelters. And for that, we have to have an adequate amount of water. Shelterees with contagious disease or suspected contagious disease, which COVID is one, shall be isolated immediately. Aside from COVID, these stuff like pink eye, TB, or measles, right? If you see somebody just to cough up a storm, you're not sure, might ask a couple of questions, turn them over to the health worker, and then she will do, he will do the due diligence and determine whether that person would need to be isolated and removed from a shelter. Right? Scabies and all of these kinds of things, right? We don't see a lot of that. Sleeping areas shall be kept clean and tidy at all times. Waste containers shall be disposed of regularly. Remember, you're there to ensure that this happens. You're there to manage. You're not there to pick up the broom and sweep and get the place tidy up and all of that. This is a job of the shelterees. So again, this is part of some of the functions that the shelterees will be engaging in, part of the scheduling, your routine, right? You get up at 6, you tidy up a place, you get ready to eat. After eat, you help with the cleaning up while another crew help with the begin the preparation of lunch, and you go through the process. And at 3:30, we have a meeting in at the shelter with everybody present and find out, have to be long, a couple of minutes, and that's your routine, right? And part of that routine is the shelterees being able to tidy up the area, keep it sanitized, keep it clean, right? Right, moving on. Right, these are COVID-19 protocols and procedures for shelters as of now. Right, any buildings, schools, user shelters shall accommodate 10 persons or less per classroom. Right, and I originally said 10 to 15. That's because an average size classroom would be about 10. There are some areas like community centers that are more open up. So depending on the size of your building, that will be determined by your district coordinator. Will assist you in doing that, right? But generally, classroom size, 10 person per room. Maintaining that social distance and all other protocols like the wearing of masks, the sanitizing, washing of hands, and so forth. Registration forms must reflect status. So now we will have vaccination card. The registration form will reflect that. Not vaccine, first shot, or two shot, booster shot, whatever the case might be. And this might help if you're in a if you are part of the shelter management team in managing a big school, maybe like the community college, where you have many different rooms or classrooms. You could segregate people according to their, if possible, families, where it is possible, by their status, COVID-19 status, vaccination status. Okay? So the ones that are not vaccinated maybe can go into one room. The ones that are vaccinated can go into another, depending on the level of vaccination. Just to probably more manage that COVID situation there. Contact information for health department assigned representative volunteer must be shared with the shelter manager for each shelter prior to allowing people into the shelter. So you will have access to the Ministry of Health through the Emergency Operations Center as well. So any situation that involves health, be it COVID or otherwise, right? Remember, the Emergency Operations Center is up and running and functioning with all these other committees present, so we can deal with whatever situation that is out there in the community from a shelter perspective, or from an evacuation perspective, or from a search and rescue perspective, right? Whatever the case might be. People showing signs of the flu and are coughing, sneezing, not permitted to enter the general shelter area. So you would probably want to remember, we talk about the space in the shelter that will be designated for different purposes. Well, one of those areas will be to isolate people, and so you want to put that person there until you can either remove them or deal with them otherwise, right? 6 feet social distance markings must be visible in each shelter. So either you tape it off or with mark it off, so that people can which would help people to maintain that distance, right? And you must enforce those rules at all times. Just like a shelter rules that we would want you to put up on the wall somewhere as people are registering, so they can read it and you can from time to time draw their attention to. Same must be done with COVID flyers would be made available, reminding people to adhere to the protocols and the procedures, right? All right, you can switch. Any questions so far or comments? Well, I think Ms. Ogaldes is figuring out the switch. All right. Everybody good so far? Am I talking too fast?
And then I'm switching it, but for some reason, I don't think you're
No,
seeing
sir,
it.
everything well understood.
Or you the switch and I know the seat? Well, the switch now, you did the
Yeah.
child protection policies. So I'm on the next slide, so I'll deal with it here. All right, remember I told you one of the vulnerable groups that we have to be very mindful of, right? The elderly, physically challenged persons, right? Maybe wheelchair or otherwise, right? Another group is children, right? So here is some child protection policies that we have to be mindful of, all right? These are international mandates, right? International human rights laws and principles. No discrimination towards children with disabilities or anybody for that matter, right? HIV, AIDS, street children, unaccompanied children, and children who are head of household, right? Sometimes sad, but sometimes it's some people find it easy to be dismissive of these people, right? And so we don't want to do that. If you find yourself on a team, shelter management team, one of the reasons you'll be on that team is because you care about people, you're looking out for people, and you're trying to help people get through a difficult time. So I don't imagine this would be any kind of difficulty with our shelter management team, right? But there are others who you might come across even within your own shelter that doesn't hold to those values, right? So you'll have to be on the lookout for them. So as the managers and wardens of that facility, you want to ensure that there's no discrimination as such, right? Next slide. And if there's a situation where you need additional support or help, remember the Emergency Operations Center is there to deal with issues that surround this child protection and disability, persons with diverse ability.
Are you seeing the slide that says child protection policies continued humanitarian principles?
No, I depend.
Oh, man.
I don't want.
It doesn't seem. Let me stop sharing and then share again. It seems like it's not responding.
Okay. We could take a minute break. I can see if I could bring up my one and share it.
Kenton, do you want me to try sharing it?
Yeah,
Or
try sharing it again. I was trying to. Let's see. I think I had. This is day 2. I was trying to download it and then share it myself.
okay, so I'm sharing. Everybody able to see it?
Are you sharing? Let's see.
Yes, Kenton, it's up.
All right.
You want me to stop sharing so you could share? Let me stop sharing because it doesn't seem like this is working. Okay, so now you can go ahead and share.
I'm not seeing it. All right, hold on. Coming up. See anything?
Yes.
All right. All right. Child protection policies continued. Everybody seeing that?
Yes,
Yes, we're
sir.
seeing it.
All right, we're good to go. So this should take us to the finish line now, or until somebody take over. All right, humanity, all girls, boys, women, everybody, men of all ages shall be treated humanely, shall be treated impartially. Right? Assistance is delivered to all those who are suffering whilst ensuring respect for the individual. So I want to be impartial, right? To everybody. Neutrality, that's another principle, another policy, right? Want to be fair and want to be neutral when dealing with people, ensure that everybody is getting the best possible care and attention that you can give, given your limitations as well, right? In terms of maybe resources or availability and stuff. Do no harm, and this implies that humanitarian action must avoid discrimination between affected population on the basis of the causes of the crisis. And so basically avoid that discrimination. So in summing it all up, you want to be impartial and you want to be fair. You want to be neutral, right? And you want to ensure that that humanitarian spirit is at work for everybody, right? So that we can everybody, while they might not get exactly what they want, they will know and understand that you're doing your best to make their make the situation as comfortable as it can be for everybody. Right? Very carefully seek children, or be on the lookout for them, like I said, right? That are in a vulnerable situation. So if you seek children as officers, guidance counselors, and community workers, social workers, people who are trained to deal with people in vulnerable situation, right? That they can help you as a shelter as the shelter management team to deal with that situation that you might find yourself in, right? So you can tap into these people maybe through more than likely you will not have access to human development officers unless social services, unless there's a situation that requires them to come in. And the primary reason being that they will be in the emergency operations center in their capacity as relief supplies management managers and their new committee for special needs persons, right? But they will be available in the event that there's a situation that requires their intervention, right? However, there are other people that you might be able to tap into. A lot of times, trained teachers are able to assist in these capacities because they are trained in how to deal with some of these instances within their schools. Counselors, be it through religious organizations or again through schools, if they're available to you. These are some of the people that can assist you. Pastors who might be there who are probably used to some of the people in the community, and again that would be able to talk to people. And so you want to tap into people with those kinds of experience or ability, right? Arrange food in the event that families need to remain in the shelter on a long-term basis, right? So if people are unable to return back to their normal place of residence after the incident, after the hazard has passed, say the hurricane passed, they put up the green flag. But the green flag does not mean that everything is green and okay. It simply means that the hazard has passed and that the emergency workers can now go out and begin to do their job in terms of looking after the assessment and the humanitarian issues that we find in the aftermath. And so quite likely there might be people in the shelter who are unable to return home, right, or unable to their place of normal place of residence. And so we would have to make arrangements for them to stay within that shelter and have the basic needs met. Again, remember these are vulnerable persons, right? Elderly children, so forth. And so as a shelter manager and wardens, your part of your job would be to ensure that that continues, right? There might be different scenarios that play out in regards to this, where we might be able to move people from different shelters and put them in an area that is more manageable and more accessible, and close out most of the other shelters, right? So that would be a situation that the emergency center would look into, and then you can map up your shelter responsibilities in that particular building, right? The important thing though is to ensure that the shelter is not closed until we have dealt with these situations where vulnerable people cannot return home, right? Try to make the environment within each shelter child-friendly. Designate educational and recreational areas. When you're in lockdown, there's not much you can do as this time is passing over, but there still might be some. But while there's people occupying the shelter, especially children, a simple thing like a tennis ball to throw around the place might be something good. So to engage the children in storybook, even if coloring book, these kinds of things. Not a whole lot of resources you might have available, but there's simple things that you can bring along. Maybe a storybook that you read to your children or something. Like I say, a tennis ball or something, just to make it a little bit more child friendly within the shelter. Right? Designate separate areas for unaccompanied children, separated children, and child head of households, right? Again, special emphasis on these groups. You might see unaccompanied children coming into your shelter, and so you want to designate an area for them that you will be able to look out and look after them properly, and get the help of other people probably in the shelter, people that you know and you absolutely could trust to kind of help you to look out for them. Children who are separated from their parents or separated from their guardians or something, and end up at a shelter. Yeah. So they might be separated before they reach. Maybe they catch the wrong bus, maybe during the evacuation process, because you will have people in a shelter who are being evacuated from another area, right? And for some reason they get mixed up or get separated, which if we do things properly during evacuation shouldn't happen. But for whatever reason they might come on a transport that we might not be under our watch, so to speak. Now people move by themselves and evacuate themselves sometimes. Or some people might have the tendency of sending their children ahead of them, or that kind of thing. So you want to be on the lookout for them, because during this crisis time, they're even more vulnerable because they're predators and people prowling around the place, all over the place, and coming in. So you have to be very careful with them and ensure that they're being properly looked after. Be ready to protect children and prevent sexual assault. Consult with children regarding issues affecting them. So you want to talk to them, be able to talk to them. Again, teachers and people who deal with children on a regular basis through their profession could be of tremendous help and assistance here if they're available in the shelter, even if they're not a part of the shelter management team, right? Children can also be a source of support for each other. So if you group them together, you normally see children get together and after 1 minute they start to play with each other, so get their minds off of the incident. Ensure there is adequate supervision of children at the shelters to protect them from intimidation, coercion, violence, drug abuse, sexual harassment, and other forms of abuse, right? Like I said, you are what stands between these children, these vulnerable children, and the people who are out there with no good intentions, right? And especially in a crisis situation like this, some of them take advantage of that situation, right? Ensure adequate security while children move around the shelter, safe spaces and toilet and wash hand areas, meeting points so that in the event of accidental separation, children can be reunited quickly. So as people move around, and even if you're managing properly, there shouldn't be that kind of movement where people are just mingling, especially under COVID situation, right? So we have to keep a tight lid on it. But anywhere where people can congregate, like the bathroom area, the kitchen area or dining area, or maybe a recreational area, you have to be extra vigilant so that they don't get separated or lost, right? A good thing to do is probably maybe like the body system for children or children of a certain age where they look out for each other as well. You could implement that, right? No child leave the shelter. Absolutely no child leave the shelter without permission of a guardian, right? So when time come to deactivate the shelter that we'll get into, you just like how you register them, you will deregister them, and if they came in with adult parents or guardian, and they shouldn't leave unless they are accompanied by those same persons, right? If they came in unaccompanied, like we had discussed previously, then what you do is you don't allow them to leave the shelter. It's at this stage now that human services will get involved, because then we would have to place them with a responsible adult or guardian until their situation can be resolved, if it can. Liaise with local authorities, including human services, for the tracking of missing or separated children. In the event of any incident, it is important to report to the relevant authorities, which would be human services in the case of children, and then they would get the necessary agencies involved, which would be police and other agencies. No? But your primary contact would be the Housing and Shelter Committee chairperson. This is an issue in the shelter, and so it goes to that person. Right beside that person, or in that same room, or around that same table, would be somebody from Human Services sitting as well. So whenever that situation comes from you to the Emergency Operations Center, that will be passed on through the director to those appropriate officers, who will then pick up that situation and deal with it, right? And so that's your line of communication is through the Emergency Operations Center. These are things that you would write in your logbook, because each shelter will have a logbook, even if it's an exercise book, right? So some of the things that goes into your logbook is the date, the time you arrive at the shelter, the date, the opening, shelter management team present is so with this person, and then shelter is declared open at such a time, and you begin to register people and so forth. Issues that pops up like these, be it shortages or the late delivery of stuff, or the non-functioning of certain equipment, stuff you note in a diary, along with incidents such as that involve vulnerable groups and vulnerable persons. Conduct an assessment and make recommendation after each incident. This information must be forwarded to the National Shelter Committee for consideration, right? So after your entire shelter experience, you will be expected to write a report, and you will include some of the things that you discovered while managing a shelter. And you might even have suggestions along with the team and recommendations on how we can improve, all right? But as it relates to vulnerable groups, child protection, include that as well. It is important for you, and that's why you mentioned your logbook, it is important for you to document all of these things, right? And so that we can have a follow-up and have that documentation that can help us resolve situations such as the issues with children. And again, children will need to be assessed medically by personnel from the medical authority if such is required. Okay, basic first aid. Moving on. There's a 4 B's in first aid training that will be focused on. There is a planned session for you guys to go through first aid training, so I won't dwell a lot on this, but this is just a quick overview of what you can expect in that training. And basically, you will cover basics of first aid. You'll cover the 4 B's. You'll cover CPR, right? And the 2 goals in CPR, which is to keep blood flowing throughout the body and keep air flowing throughout the lungs, to keep persons and bodies alive until professional help can arrive, and then they take over. So you'll learn that technique taught to you, how to do CPR, and how to deal with the 4 B's, okay? The chest compressions and all of those stuff. So that will be covered in a session by people who are trained to give that first aid session, right? But 4 B's is the breathing, bleeding, burns, bones in terms of broken bones, whatever, that they will cover in the basic first aid for shelter, right? Seizures, nosebleeds, and asthma attacks might cover that as well. So for those, I know many of you in this session already have this kind of training, so it will be a refresher for you guys, tour guides and such. But this is a good session that you will get more into. All right. That will be, I believe this is scheduled to be a face-to-face kind of session, so this will be dependent on the situation with COVID. Of course, you will be notified when this is going to take place for you to complete this whole CERT training, right? This is an exercise, but for lack of time, we'll skip this one. This is basically how to figure out space, right? And how many space would be in a building. It's a good group exercise when we do face-to-face training. Another group exercise. All right. Hurricane warning phases. I want to get to the activation of shelter, so I'm watching my time. Basically, you would see these flyers. You should see them in public places because we post them up in public places. You're also a part of a flyer that we give out, part of a little booklet thing, right? It's very helpful for you to understand, especially when you're listening to the radio on the approach of a hurricane, where these storms are located, how far away it is, and what it means in terms of your preparation, right? And so phase 1, basically you're at 72 hours. In phase 1, you have that allotted time before you can expect impact if it doesn't shift course, right? Now this can dramatically be reduced in terms of time depending on the speed of the storm, right? At phase 2 is declared when it's 48 hours away, all right? And phase 3 is declared when it's only 36 hours away, all right? These are all phases. Now we have document we call an SOP, or standard operating procedure. And this is good for any community or CERT team to have as well, right? And it basically tells you step 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on how many steps in each of these phases, and stuff that you would need to do. So for instance, in phase 1, there's certain activities and certain things that you'd want to do. Phase 2, another set of activities and stuff that you need to get done. Phase 3, all the way down to when you reach a shelter or before the storm makes impact, right? So it's a very simple document that you can come up with, so that you can know for your family. Remember your family plan, what you do in phase 1, what you do in phase 2, what you do in phase 3. If it's a hurricane that you're dealing with, if it's a flood, it might be a little bit different, right? But along the same line. So this will help you to know, okay, boy, I call phase 1, I can check my checklist. Okay, I need to make sure I get these things done, or make sure I have this stuff together, or that type of thing. Phase 2, and it helps you to keep on track so that you can be prepared, right? Unit 4, operations, shelter activation phases, right? I want to cover this. This is important. So we have the different activation phases in the operation phase of shelter, right? So if we are doing this, we're either phase 2, phase 3, depending on some shelters, because some shelters will open before, quite a while before, if it involves an evacuation process. Others might not, right? But you have pre-activation, where you prepare the shelter, right? So you'll make a quick visit to the shelter, ensure everything is in place and it's ready to open, right? Remember, for a hurricane, we have a few days, right? So this will be part of the process, right? Activation is the actual opening of the shelter, right? Where your team is present, you get everything set up, and you're ready to receive shelterees, right? You go through the whole process of managing the whole situation within a shelter, and the incident has passed, and people can go back to their homes. Everybody can disperse the shelter after cleaning up and so forth. Make sure that you return the shelter back to its original state, or even better. And then you reach the deactivation phase, right? Where you close down the shelter. This is after doing some of your logistical and accounting of people, logistical work, cleaning up, like I said before, accounting for what is you haven't used, accounting for the building, check and make sure that nothing has been damaged or destroyed. If it is, you make a note of it, do a quick report, you clean up the place, everybody pack up the stuff, call for the boss, that kind of thing. If they need to be transported away from the shelter, maybe your shelter was one that was a evacuation shelter where evacuees came to, and so all that is taken care of. And in post-activation is the functional return of the shelter. So you get back the shelter to what it was before you actually open it to receive shelterees, right? You fix it up back, clean it up, and then you do your reports, turn it into your housing and shelter chairperson, and you're done. Okay, along with your recommendations on how we can improve, along with your suggestions, identifying the difficulties you have, maybe what went well, what didn't go so well, and that whole thing in report writing, right? Nothing elaborate, just some bullet points and some things for us to look at, right? So those are the phases. The opening of the shelter. The manager duty is to convene a management team meeting. So you as a manager will already by now know who is on your team. A team of at least 6, preferably 8 to 10, even up to 12 persons, right? Convene a management team meeting, so get everybody together. Ensure that you have the keys and that they're ready to open, right? Open the shelter at the designated time. at this stage you would have already checked the building and did a quick walkthrough to ensure that everything is still what it should be, because remember, we inspect in beginning of the year, and you might be accessing this building late November as a shelter, and so you have to do a quick run through. All of this will be arranged before, and you, during your team meeting, you assign who will be the registrar, who will take care of the supplies and accounting, who will take care of maybe scheduling people and scheduling tasks and that kind of thing, right? And you go through the checklist, and depending on the task that is needed to be done within the shelter, you assign different wardens to be the overseer of that task. Collect supplies, right? Be in communication with your housing and shelter chairperson or somebody from that committee to ensure that you have everything you need, all your supplies, all your forms, everything, as you prepare to open. So if we expect shelter to be open at say 4 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, from well into the morning, maybe 8, you will be contacted and say, hey, get ready, shelter will need to be open at 2. And so you go through the whole morning trying to get everything together and in place and get your team called up and that kind of thing. If you've done all of that, set up your shelter and you're ready to receive the shelterees as they come. Okay. Register them, try to get as much information from them. Remember the COVID-19 protocol, so you try to capture that during registration, trying to capture the status and whatever decision you have to make there in terms of maybe separating people or assigning them specific areas depending on their status. You do that right there at registration. Conduct daily meetings. You do daily checks to make sure everything is working in your facility, or if there's any damage that had occurred, you make note of these in a diary on a daily basis if you have to, and then on a daily basis you communicate with the emergency operations center through housing and shelter representative, right? So you'll have that daily contact, constant contact, right? Almost like at different intervals, because we at the emergency operations center will want to know almost on an hourly basis how many people are in shelters, and so maybe on the hour or on the half hour, you would, if you could, send a message and say at CCC, we 4 rooms to capacity at this hour, or 1 room to capacity at this hour, or we have 5 people in room 1, that kind of thing. So we know how many people are in the shelter, and then you would give other information in regards to children, disability, and vulnerable groups. That helps us a lot in the emergency operations center to prepare and to anticipate what kind of situation could arise, and also to ensure that we're in a position to meet the needs of the people in the shelter. Committees, remember the 15 committees that Mr. Collis tell you about? The committees who will be interested in your information coming out of the shelter will be human resources, would be relief supplies management, because we need to know what kind of stuff the shelter will be requiring in terms of food, and medical care as well. If you have different, if you have maybe a lot of elderly people, a lot of hypertensive people, people with diabetes, or particular interest with COVID. So all these committees will be looking out for the information from your shelter, so that they can pool all of that from across the district, and we would have a good picture within the emergency operations center as to what is occurring in the shelters across the district that are open. Maintain discipline. Remember, I talk about utilizing shelterees to assist you in different capacities based on their experience or based on their knowledge and that they have. Keep a 24-hour log of shelter activities. Establish and supervise healthcare daily and sanitization, COVID protocols. Record all equipment and supplies and contact leaders of community. If you find yourself in your community, in any particular community, be mindful that community leaders are there, and while you are the person in charge, totally in charge of that shelter, right? Liaise with community leaders as well, because they can be of tremendous help and tremendous resource to you within their community, and they would want to know what's happening with their people as well. So liaise with them, okay? And always keep communication with the EOC, right? Enforce shelter rules. All existing laws of the country will be enforced. So yes, during crisis time, but we're not give no pass to nobody if you know laws broken or rules. Shelteries shall use areas as a sign, right? So help them to maintain law and order by assigning different spaces to them and ensure that they utilize that space, right? Personal conflicts shall be resolved by shelter group leaders, shelter wardens, shelter managers as well. Another way to utilize shelteries that will help you is to have group leaders within the same shelteries, right? And if they can't solve a situation, then they bring it to you or bring it to the wardens, or bring it to the manager, right? Minor violations could be handled by group leaders, especially if you have a large shelter with different levels and so many different rooms, right? Because you can't be in all the places at the same time. Restraint and serious disciplinary action will be ordered only by the manager, right? So if something seriously wrong, the manager will have to intervene there and have to adjudicate the situation. Serious violations such as wounding, stealing, rape, other serious offenses would be dealt with quickly, and then of course the authorities would need to be called in on such incidents, right? Fire safety and fire, no dangerous weapons will be allowed in, no dangerous liquids in the shelter. So their shelter rules will spell some of these things out. So a good place to put up your shelter rule, if you could have a Bristol board or something big where you could write it on, would be right at the registration. So as people are registering, they can read the rules, or you can point them in that direction so they can familiarize themselves with it. And then after you get a room full or you get people registered, you catch a break, you might want to go over it with them again, that kind of thing. But always keep the rules right up there in front of their face, right? So none of these stuff will be allowed in the shelter. No smoking will be allowed in the shelter. No alcoholic beverages will be consumed within the shelter area. Shelteries shall watch for and report any potential fire hazards, such as careless use of combustible materials, right? Again, smoking can be one of those. So smoking will be permitted only in designated areas. So you would have to work out where that would be as a manager or warden. Like I said, people will be coming into these shelters with a range of different issues that they are bringing along with them, that they have to deal with on a daily basis, compounded by the fact that they now have this hazard approaching and all the hustle and stress that brings along with it in terms of preparing to go to a shelter. You know, they might not have stuff at home readily available, and now they have to find stuff to come to a shelter, and even that would be a part of the situation, right? So they're coming with all these issues, right? And reach your shelter, and now you have to be the one to adjudicate, and they want to help calm them down, and they want to help solve problems and to find solution, right? And so your task is not impossible, but it's not easy as well. And so it's take a special breed and group of people to do this job, and anybody that steps up is commended and is commendable for doing this. Again, it goes back to appealing to your humanitarian spirit in these times of crisis. And so you're there and you're wearing a lot of different hats sometimes in the shelter, no? And they will look to you to solve their problems a lot of times as well, because they see you as a leader, and they see you as a person in charge, and they see you as a person that they can, you know, maybe have some hope in getting some of their situation resolved. And so you play a very important and crucial and necessary role and function as a shelter manager and a shelter warden, right? And so some of the principles here, right, is early detection. If you see things stirring up, you know, try to deal with it early. Try to have a keen eye and look out for them, so you can detect stuff early and try to resolve it. Try to understand what is going on, thorough analysis. And when you do have to intervene or do have to get involved, you try to be impartial. Try to look for alternative ways to solve the problem. And remember, you're not there just relying on your own self. You have your team, and then you also have people within the same shelterees who can be of assistance to you, right? So act swiftly, you know. Problems that you will encounter and the shelterees will encounter, and then it will end up as a situation for you to assess is crowding, behavioral problems, right? Communication, you know. Nowadays, if you can't communicate, then a serious issue, right? Cell phones and internet and WhatsApp and Facebook and these things. Equipment, lack of equipment or failure of equipment sometimes before the hazard threatens. So these are some of the issues, some of the problems that can arise. Techniques is again adjudicate. So at some point in time, you'll have to step up and be a judge in the situation and make a determination or a decision, right? Again, it might not be what the decision might not be what some people might want, but if they suspect or if they see you as somebody that is trying to find a amicable solution and it is being fair, they will go along with you and negotiate, try to get parties to, you know, come to terms with the situation. Reorganize. You might want to move people around if that might help. Delay tactic is another technique. You know, ensure people that you're dealing with it, even if it's going to take a while and you can't readily solve the issue. If they know that it is something that you're aware of and you remind them of that, then, you know what, man, work out there, you know, at such a time, you know, or, you know, it will help, you know. Once they don't get the notion that you're ignoring them, you know, and not looking after the issues, and sometimes the time will bring a solution itself, right? Like I said, don't be afraid to ask for help for a given situation. I mean, you don't have to announce it out. Sometimes you might, hey, anybody in here will have any kind of carpentry skill, or anybody could open a lock, or something like that, or open a door, or fix something, or that kind of stuff. You might find people right there that can do that for you. So basically, you're there as a manager, as a warden, on a team to manage the building, manage the shelter with people in it. So you have to manage people, you have to manage resources, you have to manage time, and all of these stuff, right? For that period of time that is necessary to give people that safe place that they can find that protection that they need from the elements or from whatever situation that is upon them. Okay, we kind of cover that already. Kind of went over that as well, already as well. Coming with problems before the disaster, right? And problems compounded by the disaster, and problems they will find within the shelter themselves. So shelterees will display all of these issues, right? From financial, emotional, insecurity, and behavioral problems, right? These are some of the problems that they will find or that can arise or you can face within a shelter: shortages, overcrowding, garbage accumulation, non-delivery, lack of communication or no communication, equipment breakdown. Right? Remember, like I said, your supporting agency or your supporting mechanism is within the emergency operation center that is there. Right? Closing down, the shelter manager, about 10 minutes. Shelter manager duties along with the wardens are arranged for proper evacuation of shelterees, right? So you'll begin to sign people out, begin to deregister once the storm has passed, right? Before you do any of this and deactivate the shelter, ensure that everything is clean, or else you will be left with a dirty shelter and you have to clean it up, right? So ensure that people clean up their place, ensure that the bathrooms are clean, ensure that you do an inspection to find out if there's anything damaged and how you get damaged and who damaged it if you could, and try to go through the whole process before you actually deactivate and register people. So when that will be the last thing you do, right? Because you've already taken care of everything. Get people to pack up their belongings, make sure and take only what they may bring with them. Many instances we hear of, the teachers are missing stuff out in the classroom and that kind of thing that they work so hard to put together with stuff, and so we don't want to do that or that to happen. If your shelter was dealing with evacuees, then we will need to transport them back. So you will obviously be in communication with the EOC, and that will be arranged. The only person that can deactivate your shelter, give the permission to activate or to deactivate the shelter would come from the National Emergency Coordinator after the all clear, right? The all clear will come from NEMO to National Coordinator. The deactivation of shelter will come from the National Coordinator as well. So the regional coordinators, the district coordinators across the country does not have that authority, or nobody has that authority except National Emergency Coordinator. So we have to wait as district coordinators, given on the communication back and forth and what's happening on the ground in a particular area. Get that permission to deactivate that particular shelter. Some might be deactivated and some might not be, right? But you don't deactivate the shelter until you hear from the NEMO district coordinator, and they will not deactivate until they hear from the National Emergency Coordinator. Sign out shelteries, like I said, is the last thing you do after you establish that everything is okay within your shelter, right? So after you do all of this, and then you'll go to your team meetings and so forth. So after they left, your building's supposed to be reorganized and clean, right? You sit down with the shelter management team. You don't start taking out what is left in terms of resources or supplies, and you have a team meeting and you prepare your notes to write your report and get that done, and then you submit it to the shelter committee. All right. I know it's a lot. We kind of spill out a lot at you within the designated time. I still got, what, 8 minutes, right? So these are some of the things in review, and I would like to jog your memory. 3 important responsibilities of a shelter manager, 3 important areas of a shelter, right? So the important responsibilities can be the opening of the shelter, right? The assignment of different tasks within the shelter, right? And things like that. 3 most important areas in the shelter, your medical bay probably, your registration station, your storeroom, right? An isolation area, your kitchen preparation area, these things, right? So if you have an answer for these, you can do it tonight. As you can, or a review. We normally do a review at the beginning of the session, like tomorrow. These are some of the things that we want you to think about. So when Mr. Renee starts asking questions, these are some of the things that you can answer, right? So I'll give you time to review and think. I'm sure you will have some of this available to you because Ronnie will email out the presentation, right? How many rooms measuring 30 by 40 by 30 feet are required for 350 persons? So we will do this one on COVID requirement, which is, let's say, 10 persons per room. They give you how many rooms? That's easy, right? What formula is used to indicate how many people can shelter in a room, right? You just have to remember the square footage, right? Which is 18 square feet or 24 square feet in some cases, right? So either one of them will be acceptable. Which is the most important shelter operation phase and why? And this is something you will determine according to what you've heard, right? So if you believe that it's this shelter phase, or you believe, you might say, well, all of them important. I say, well, I think this one is very important. If we not get this one, well, we'll miss the whole thing, that kind of thing. So you can review that. So these are some of the questions that we want as reviews to kind of gauge how our training is going and what the information is like getting on your end. So thank you very much for your time, for bearing with us. I know we talk a lot, and we wish we had more time. I wish this was face-to-face so we can have more interaction and do some of the exercise and this kind of thing. Unfortunately, it is what it is. Still got to get the job done. We still have to be ready. We still have to ensure that you as a person, your family, and your community is in a better state of readiness. And so that is why we do these sessions, right? So again, thank you very much. Have a good night. I look forward to being with you all again tomorrow night.
Thank you, Kenton.
Thank you. Good night.
And thank everybody. Thank everybody for sticking in there. And so like Mr. Perm said, we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Mm.